So I'll start with a couple of questions to begin with. So how many of you are first timers for this conference, Open Source India? Oh, that's a pretty good number. I'm also a first time member for this conference. Glad to be here as a speaker on my first appearance of this conference. I've been to a lot of conferences, other conferences over a decade, and so glad to be here, and especially after COVID. We have been all so used to attending conferences from a webinar basis, from the convenience of doing things at laptop. But it's so good to be here. I was here last week in Bangalore for another conference, so already a bit warmed up. So hope I can get into that, get rid of the stage fear and all of that stuff. Here at Open Source India to talk about test intelligence platform, and I want to really thank the organizers for dedicatedly having a track. I think this track, after the panel discussion, we call it FOSS, a track that is dedicated to especially say to the world that there are open source products that we are building out from India. So really glad for that opportunity. Thanks Neeraj and the whole organizers crew. And I'm here to talk about test intelligence platform, test at scale. Or probably, I don't know how many of you noticed, probably this is the only talk that talks about testing in the whole program. So how many of you had a chance to look at it? Okay, quite a few. Thanks for noticing that. And really glad for that again. So let's get started. A little bit about me. So I lead the DevRel and the Office of Open Source at LambdaTest. So LambdaTest is a cross-browser cloud testing company where we help enterprises and startups and other companies run tests at scale with multiple devices and browsers. That's what we do at LambdaTest. And I've been an open source fan for a very long time. How many of you heard about the tool called Selenium, which will help you run automated tests? All right, so I've been a committer for Selenium for over a decade. I've been probably not very open in Indian ecosystem, open source ecosystem. It's because of largely for the reasons that I've been spending a time a little bit in abroad. But I've been contributor to Selenium since 2009 and probably the only committer in India or towards the whole of Western world for about 9 years until last year. There was one other committer. I'm really glad that we had more committers because it was part of the mentoring group that I started getting people into open source, especially around testing ecosystem. And also, how many of you know about Software Freedom Conservancy? Okay, quite a few hands, a few hands. So Software Freedom Conservancy is a group of, it's a group that works towards making free and open source software. You should go and check it out if you're interested in learning more about open source. And also I'm committed to Appium. Appium is another tool in the mobile testing ecosystem where it will help you test your mobile applications on emulator, simulator, or even real devices for that matter. And I've open sourced a couple of projects where if you have Selenium-based tests which will drive your application on web browsers, you could, how to distribute and run those tests in a Kubernetes cluster. And also I've open source some frameworks around bringing the observability momentum into Selenium-based tests, where why developers only enjoy having the observability momentum right from instrumenting code into microservices, but also you could get from end-to-end test as well. So go check it out, those projects. I'll share the link a little later. And apart from that, I've been a DevOps and accessibility advocate, and I can talk about MotoGP, basketball, and a lot of things. Those are my interests other than the time that I spent at code. So, yes, so talking about tests at scale, one of the things that we wanted to literally, I want to step back and talk about is continuous delivery, right? So what is continuous delivery? And continuous delivery is nothing but it's this process where you have a code, you build, you test it, and then you have some sort of automated way that will help you, push into a pipeline where, push using a pipeline where you have the code already tested and be ready to push into production. And whereas there is a difference between delivery and deployment, right? So delivery is where you have some sort of manual intervention where you make sure the code that you've written and has been tested properly and has been able to hit into production, where deployment is where you continuously write a code, build it, test it, and then push it into production. A lot of companies do that these days. But the things that you see in common across these terms, or people call it shift left, shift right, DevOps, all this momentum, right? So let's keep all those aside for a moment, and we talk about something that is very common in all of these aspects, which is nothing but continuous testing, right? So what is continuous testing? So continuous testing is not a separate process itself, right? It's part of everything. What do we mean by everything? Is it literally meaning continuous test means running tests every time. It doesn't mean that so as well, right? It's not equal to continuously running your test. It is all about you being able to test at all the stages. So how many of you have seen this picture before? Quite a few hands again, which means you're all very much interested in testing. So thanks for being here, and also being more interested about testing at all the stages. So testing really can be done at different stages, right? Right from plan, branch, code, up until you deploy and release, for that matter, using UAT releases or A/B testing after, or you do some sort of non-functional testing for performance, accessibility, security in your pipeline. So all of those things that you could do. And when you do these at a scale, a lot of things happens, right? Which are the things that we need to take care of. Because ideally, when you are in some sort of a delivery methodology like Agile, for example, you start at something small, and then obviously you have some sort of, I'm sure most of you know about testing pyramid, where we have unit and then integration and then end-to-end at the top of the layer. And we talk about adding more tests, right? So when I mean tests, even though I'm coming from the world of end-to-end testing and Selenium, for this talk per se, when I mean test, let's assume or think of it as all the tests, right? So I'm not distinguishing between unit tests, integration, or end-to-end. So when I mean tests, it's tests. Test everything. So automation is not only about end-to-end testing or the ones that are there at a presentation layer, but automation is all about automated unit testing, automated integration testing, and as well as automated end-to-end testing or contract testing for all that matters. So some of the challenges when application evolves, your test also should evolve ultimately, right? So when that happens, a lot of challenges comes to your place. Like say for example, lack of test environments, the lack of ability to distribute your tests in a multiple environments for that matter, and test data management, right? I mean, this is one of the key problems that we face, and prior to LambdaTest, I've been a consultant all my life. I've spent a number of years with ThoughtWorks as a principal consultant, and with Wipro and a lot of fintech companies, where I've seen clients facing some of these problems around managing environments, managing test data, and all of this. And also, even though some companies had a good pipeline to make sure all the testing is done at every stages, some of the observable metrics is also missing, right? And oh boy, don't talk about processes. So one of you had these problems around getting way past the bureaucratic approvals. Quick show of hands. Couple of, it's so relatable that in day-to-day life we have to wait for some other teams to give a go-ahead, and all of this happens still today, and which is a number of problems. So what does it all have to do with the talk that I wanted to talk about, right? The test intelligence platform. So for that perspective, I wanted to focus on the last 3 points here, which talks about the observable metrics, processes, and flaky tests. Where the first 3 points, there's a lot of tools and environments that is there, which will help you take care of that. Because the last 3 points, observable metrics or processes, and the flaky tests management, when you run a test at scale, is more about processes, more about the culture, right? So continuous testing, as we say, is not a process, it's a culture. It's a mindset that we need to have, that you need to be able to test at multiple stages of your delivery pipeline. So when we say flaky test, sometimes the quick definition as it goes, I think most of you would relate to it, that a test passed today, it might fail tomorrow, it might pass tomorrow. I mean, a lot of, for various reasons. It could be whether network conditions, or it could be whether our application's code is behaving differently, right? So what do you typically do when flaky test happens? A quick, let's make it a little interactive. Anyone want to take a stab at answering, when you say a flaky test, what do you do? Not the options here, for sure. Anyone want to take, yeah, please? We rerun, okay, that's there. Unfortunately, I'm not running a KBC show, so I can't give you anything. Any other answers or options? So, okay, let's make this way. How many of you agree you do these options that are shown here? Okay, I see 2 brave souls raising their hands. Thank you so much. And others who are keeping quiet, I know you all do that, right? And I know you're giggling now. Now it's validated that you all do that. So what do we do further? Like, so problems, right? So when flaky test happens, mainly I wanted to touch upon is very particularly is because that's one of the biggest culprits that we have in code pipeline, where all these problems exist because of those, right? So you get high execution time, and you have clogged CI pipelines, and then you have a lack of confidence on tests, and the overall momentum of the team goes down, right? So whenever I'm sure most of you here, all developers and testers, probably I should have checked it before, but nevertheless, whenever the build goes red or fail, how many of you ask your testing or the QA team to go and check out why the build is failed? How many of you do that? Okay, quite a few. Please don't do that. Stop doing that, because quality is everyone's responsibility, and everyone has an equal responsibility to check what has happened, right? And it could be for the matter, right? I mean, probably people, and there is a reason why some of you raised your hands do that, and I've been in that space. I've done that. I've been a QA myself. I've been an architect myself. I've been a developer myself, and I've done that for the reason because we think QAs are the ones, are the quality gatekeepers who look at having quality as one of their hands. So when such thing happens, the overall momentum, as I said, goes down, and also the ROI, it gets really hard to measure, and overall the confidence lacks, and the lack of quality also happens. So as we see, what are the things that you do when you see flaky tests, right? So you run manual rerun of your tests, and you have auto retries, and then you could correlate your test logic and changes to test results. And also you could do some proactive testing for flakiness, which is one of the beautiful things that you can do to get past your test flakiness. And that is what we're going to really see, because manual rerun is not the way to solve problems around flakiness. And auto retries, I mean, some of the test frameworks will have that. It's for the convenience sake, but when you do that, you're only making sure you're occupying your network resources and all of that to your maximum potential, but not really testing what application has gone wrong in your side. Also correlate test logic that you could typically do, and speaking of proactive testing of flakiness, that's something that we have to do. So tell me a bit more, if that's your question. Proactiveness is nothing but you're running job n number of times. So Netflix, in one of their blogs, they published 35 is their magic number. So for some reasons, they run 35 times the test, make sure they test their the test coverage is good, and they actually test their tests. There's a difference, right? To test their test. So it's probably testing your test framework itself, and jumbling test cases, right? So and I don't know how many of you do that, because that is very important, because tests should be atomic, tests should be individual, not interrelated and not even interdependent with each other. So when you change the order of test cases, sometimes you feel something is going wrong in the test, right? So that's one of the things that you could do, and make sure your test is not dependent on previous tests, and some of them still do that. An exponential degradation of test infrastructure, right? So maybe your test, all the tests has passed on a test infrastructure, either you run it using Kubernetes cluster or a container, or even a cloud provider like LambdaTest, or different other competitors in the space. Maybe you should try and tweak that a little bit. Maybe if you're using containers and Kubernetes clusters in the world, maybe try to increase, lessen the gigs of RAM and the network utilization, right? So you can actually see how your tests perform in that aspect. And also mutation testing. Mutation testing is I don't know how many of you have heard about this term, mutation testing. If not, you should go and check it out. It's the most advanced way of, I wouldn't say advanced way, but it's the most recent trend towards how people started doing some sort of mutation testing, where you make a change to your development code base on dynamically on a fly, and make sure your test, see how your test would work on top of it. Now, how companies are solving it? Well, this is not something that we are facing it recently. Since the day when CI, continuous integration, continuous delivery started, where we had the pleasure of delivering code in a button click, things have been still there, right? So people always say the code, the framework, and the test that we write has always been flaky, that's the problem, but that's not it is. So companies are solving it, like say for example, Google for example have solved it by having some sort of dependency graph. So the idea is, you can put it simple, so have a manifest file, and you make sure you write all your modules and components on a manifest file, and then have a test related to it. And then when you execute on a fly, put it in a system which will dynamically take decisions for you, where you detect a change in your development code base, and make sure you run tests only for that particular code change. It's nothing but you might have 100 tests, but your code has changed only 2 components, and the 2 components will only have relevant test cases. Maybe out of 100, you are able to run only 20. So that's exactly what the picture says, and which is nothing but running having a dependency graph of your whole development code base and having tests associated to it, and make sure you intelligently run tests on a dynamic fashion. And Google did that using dependency graph, but I don't know if that project is still active. I think it's deprecated for some reasons, and that is deprecated and is not being maintained at a scale for some reasons because it's not quite helpful. It's quite static, and we'll have to change and work upon that manifest file if you're going that way, and update while your test coverage increases. And especially if we're talking about test at scale, I don't think it's easy to maintain that. So talking about status quo, a lot of companies have tried to solve that. As we saw, Google Testar is one of them, and ProTest is another tool which was ideally started with a way of solving this problem. ProTest was started by ThoughtWorks way back, and also JTestMe again by ThoughtWorks, and Azure Pipeline TIA is a commercial option if you're in the Microsoft Azure world. I think you can check out TIA, which will help you, make sure to know that you have an observable metrics around test intelligence and how your test, has fared across different builds, and see some analytics on top of it. And Jest, interestingly, Jest also has some sort of mechanism which will help you run particular subset of tests for some, but none of this is scalable. None of this is scalable in terms of running it seamlessly in your delivery pipeline or being able to integrate with CI. And that's where test intelligence platform, test at scale, comes into picture. So where we at LambdaTest do this as an open source initiative. So we started this because as I said, it's a continuous testing company. We use clients to run browsers and mobile devices at a scale. So this is one of the asks that our clients and customers, and also from the community, testing community, right? As we see, testing is still an afterthought process. As a coming from testing community, I would still say that, and testers are still fighting out to be the first-class citizens out there. But the lack of test tooling around testing, if you compare back in few years versus now, has continuously changed tremendously. We have a lot of tools around it, and tooling around making sure the tests perform well and also at a scale is very important, and that's where we thought we should put our efforts into to make sure we have such a framework, and also take the learnings from the different tools that we had mentioned before, where it's available at github.com, LambdaTest and Test at Scale. It's Apache 2.0 license, and we are looking for contributors. So if you're someone who's interested to work in this space where you want to better the life of developers by making sure you give an observable metrics around your tests, flaky test management, having an analytics. So we'll see all the features in quite a while, but even culprit finding and all of that features. So please talk to us, and right after this talk, I'll be happy to help you get started. And the reason, again, test at scale will really help you get faster feedback from the code changes that we have, and also we spoke about lack of confidence in flaky tests and not knowing very sure why the test has failed, even though you know for sure the test is what it meant to do, right? And also manage flaky tests and keep the master green. I mean, I don't know how many of you noticed the initial opening slide that I had with the title, which had a green background, which looked like GitHub commit, but it's all about build being green, right? So we all worked towards that, and we with the hope that we have master green, and I know for sure it's very hard to maintain that sort of build. So in test at scale, we have a feature called smart test selection. So all of this code base is open source. So TAS has a component called Neuron, which we named it because that's the brain behind smart test selections. So you can see the difference between the current build process versus the task smart selection, where you can see the number of minutes that it took for the overall build is around 40 minutes, but after a smart selection, you'll be able to run it only within a couple of minutes, as it mentioned there. It's one of the key features, and I think it's one of the way forward that a lot of companies are looking forward to it, and companies like Netflix, Meta, they all do this at a different techniques, at a different level for that matter, and I think this is also something that we thought, this is very much important, thinking of dependency, taking inspiration from dependency injection as one of the dependency graph as one of the ways to take tests. And insights, and I think this insights is also very cool, where you will start from finding, I hope the laser works, no, okay, fine. So finding culprit, code culprit, I mean, one of the things that we often look forward is to finding who broke the build. I think that's one of the common questions that we look forward to having in, in our Slack channels within the development code bases and all of that. And you can find flaky tests management, right? So the first picture on the top right, you see you have many tests that has shown in green and then in red. I mean, that's literally the way how flaky test has fared between a number of builds in the history. So TAS will have a neat dashboard that shows around complete set of builds based on the filter. You have complete control over how do you want to do that, and as well as good analytics and test trends around how your test has fared in number of builds. And on top of it, we also give some performance metrics around how the client-side performance has been made. I think it's still cooking up. It's not accurate or it's not mature yet, but that's something that we need some more help as well. So if you're interested, please go ahead, reach out to us and we'll help you get started. And this is the trends that I talked about on how your test would look like in a past couple of things. And so all of this dashboard will really help you, set up the solve two things, right? So if you remember the, few slides back, we spoke about highlighting last 3 points, which was around flaky test, which was around observable metrics, and also processes and bureaucratic approvals, right? So all of these things will be taken care if you have some sort of dashboard like this where you have an observable metrics around it, where you don't have to fight to understand who broke the bill or who want to take a look at the code base, whichever has gone wrong, and for no reason wondering why the test has failed and how do you solve that for that. So all of these things can be taken care. Now, speaking of TAS architecture, quickly, if you're interested in about, okay, tell me more, if I want to contribute, what are the things that I'll be handling, right? So this slide is for you, where we help you. So TAS can be used in 2 different options, one self-hosted and one in cloud environments. If you wanted to do it in self-hosted environments, Synapse, so Synapse is a name that we have given. It's the engine behind the TAS cloud. It's on-the-fly container management that we have, where the way how it works is you make a code commit, give access to your GitHub source repository, and webhook will be called, and then it reaches the TAS server, which we have, which is either, as I said, it's 2 options. When you have it self-hosted and then in cloud, and then on the type it has a Synapse which will run the jobs, which is nothing but a Docker containers below it. And also, if you choose the way of running it in cloud, you have those options, and then all of this goes back into the TAS server, and then talk it back to the dashboard. So all of this happens. So for the front end, we use Next.js. For most of the engines that process all of this, like smart test selections, learning from how the test has failed, the intelligence part of it, all of this is based on Golang, which is microservices based architecture that we have. So if you're someone who loves working on JavaScript, Next.js, you could contribute to us on the dashboard, make sure the UI looks good and fancy, and also more meaningful rather than being fancy. And also from a backend perspective, we use all of this Docker, Kubernetes, and Golang based microservices environment and all of this. You could come and check out the whole code base. It's available at GitHub, as I mentioned, in Apache 2.0. Or also you could contribute and make it more better. Right now, one of the key challenges that we have is around the code base is very split. So one of the things we are looking forward to improve is around having it as in a monorepo style, where we have multiple components, but everything is available as a different repository within LambdaTest org in GitHub. So we wanted to change that and make sure it's more consumable in a fashion. So how many of you use Bazel? How many of you heard about the tool called Bazel, CI build? Bazel tool? Okay, only one. That's surprising. If not, you should go check it out. Bazel is a beautiful tool. Especially around monorepo style setup. I think that'll be really helpful for you to get started in managing repos where you have that style. So let's see a quick demo. I wanted to, we spoke about continuous testing and some challenges. We also spoke about some problems. So I'm just stepping back and making a summary before I get into demo. We spoke about continuous testing, the importance. We saw about the problems and challenges, and then we talk about how companies have tried to solve that in the past. And even now, so all the status quo, the slide that I showed was way back 15 years, 10 years back, and people are still having that problem. So you can imagine how important is the problem that we have to solve at this stage, and how TAS test at scale, a product that we started as an open source initiative for the community, especially with all that inspiration. And now we also looked at the architecture, how it looks like, and if you want to do someone to work in that space, please reach out. And the next immediate question is, Manoj, please tell me how easy or how hard it is to get started, right? I know obviously that is a question that will be on your mind. So this video plays that, where you can log in with GitLab, GitHub, or Bitbucket, and you need to just give some permissions, authorize it. I'll just make it playback speed a little bit, 1.2x. So this is just a survey. You can feel free to ignore it. We just wanted to understand, what do you actually do, and how do you want to using the TAS as a tool. And so once you given your repo permissions, you'll be given with a LambdaTest secret key, which is what typically the Synapse, the binary which will run out of your hosted environments will need. And you can actually, the README is pretty simple. Make the test at scale. You go into that and use the curl command, whatever we have. It's nothing but the binary of the Synapse, the engine that I spoke about. And once you execute that, that's lost. And so the only thing that we need to integrate TAS with your repository is one YAML file, which is called tas.yaml file, where it will have number of options like this, and I'm not sure if it's visible back there, but I'll just read it out for you. We have, Git repo secrets, and then LambdaTest secret. You can manage secrets on the fly as well in a dynamic fashion. But these are some of the things that you could do, and this YAML file is one of the key things that you will do. And after we associate, we give permissions to GitHub repository to TAS. All we just need is to give some personal access token, add that. I think this is all. I'll quickly fast forwarded it. This is something that we should already know about it. If not, then please talk to me. I'll be happy to give a full-fledged demo. I'm just running through it given fact of the time that we have. So we can see Docker container we use, and make sure these are the minimum settings that we have. So all I just do is Docker compose up-d and create a Docker network, and then start test at scale. You can actually see the project which is showed. So this is nothing but the dashboard that I talked about, where you can actually see the number of projects that you have. So right now I have demo projects, and then all I have to just give is import project from the dashboard. And I have to go to the project, and I said so this is so I spoke about the YAML file. So TAS, in order to integrate TAS, all we need is a YAML file. So we have a generator for you. So all you have to just is feed in what is the language that you're using, what sort of test runner that it has, whether it's Jest, Jasmine, or Mocha, and then where your test resides within your repository, the glob pattern that we use, and then a format TAS file. That's pretty much it. And on this, we also have pre-run and post-merge commit hooks. I know a lot of people have different names for it: PR validation test, smoke suite, sanity suite, regression suite, all of this. But you can also have an option to mention all of this as a pre or post merge things. So what right now happened as I was speaking is, so we have this YAML file, and all I just did is gone ahead, created a new file called tas.yaml directly on GitHub web, and make sure TAS is integrated. It's as simple as that. And you can actually see when whenever, so since the moment you add a TAS YAML file, it'll automatically start running the test based on where your test resides, and it'll have a build of it. So the first ever run, let's call it as a golden source or a baseline. So the baseline is nothing but it'll have all the tests run, and it'll have a memory of, the moment it'll start learning about how the test has fared. So the first run, if whether it's all pass, it's great. If it's all fail, or some pass, some fail, it's totally fine. So what happens next? So this is just a getting started video. I'll quickly also show this. It's a complete flaky test management video that we have. You can actually see a few builds are green, some are red, some are gray, some are Yellow, we have naming conventions for all of this. Quickly, green is passed, red is fail, and yellow is quarantine. Well, I don't have to even take the name quarantine coming out from COVID. Quarantine is all but, you found a test fail and you know it's flaky, and then you automatically make it quarantine, and you observe it for quite a few builds, and then you make it pass. And all of this task, does it behind the scenes. And this is what we call it as a proactive testing, where you don't have to do this all yourself manually. The moment you raise, you have it as a strategy as part of your PR validation test, the build automatically runs as a flaky test management itself. So in this demo, what it happens is, let me quickly show from here. I'm adding a YAML file, and then test runs. You can see the build, it has its name, it shows it's running. And we have a discovery task, which is nothing but the pre-run, all the things that we spoke about test data management, one of the challenges. If you wanted to make sure all the test data is ready, you can still have all those as part of this pre-run. And this is all easily integratable with your CI. We integrate with almost all the CI tools available in the market. That's the number of builds and how many duration it takes. And test execution is really the task which will run. And I can actually see the FTM task which is running, and which is what we call as proactive testing, where it will run behind the scenes for you, where you don't even have to do things manually. And it has some metrics, logs, and you saw some fancy graphs there, which will really help out in understanding what's the network usage of it. So here we say all the tests, and flaky test is 0, stable is 164, and we also have skip 2 tests for some reasons. And what this demo is going to do next is we come back to a test and we intentionally make some changes. And since we already ran a whole build, it is passed, and now we're making some intentional changes for the demo purpose, and we're making it fail, right? So what happens is when you trigger the build, automatically it will run the tests. And I'll quickly go to the place where it shows, you can see it shows fail, the recent tests. So some of the tests that we changed, or random number is between 21, 30, and we also see some green, red, and all of it. So on the next run, it'll actually check whether there are any code changes. If not, it'll itself make it as quarantine. And once we make sure the changes are reflected in a way that we have fixed the code actually, whether it's maybe due to various reasons. So now I go back to the code, I uncomment the changes that I did earlier, fast forwarding a bit, assume that I've done that. So you can actually see flaky test is not there anymore. And in fact, how many of you noticed I made change only to one test file? So instead of running 166 tests, which was there in the first build, it ran only 12 tests out of here. So that's the smart selection and how it works. Like it identifies that's the subset of code that changed, and this is the only minimal test that I should run so that I can get a faster feedback mechanism. Yeah, so cool. That's the end of it. So I have a dashboard that I can show you for some of you who's interested in learning about it. So this is the dashboard. We have Express. So Express.js, most of you know about, coming from Node.js world. So we extensively tested using that, and we have insights. This is the Next.js based dashboard that we have, and this is all happening in a webhook, which is why the dashboard takes a little bit. So ideally, we wanted to move it into a fashion where we are able to do it in a WebSocket based connections. So we would love some contributions around that. So these are some of the trends, contributors, and the neat dashboard that we can talk about. So I wanted to finish my talk on saying LambdaTest, even though I've been a long time open source contributor for over a decade, and I've been seeing people here even more than that. Someone said we've been contributing since 1996. That is like a huge achievement in my opinion, and I would like to learn from people and also get inspired from a lot of people who have just begun their open source journey. And LambdaTest is committed to open source, and our COO Manish Sharma, who was the ex GitHub India GM, so he's our COO at LambdaTest, and we as a team announced open source grants fostering free and open source software in the testing ecosystem. Especially we want to do upcoming a lot of frameworks that are there. I mean, Selenium started 10 years ago, it's still there. We have new test frameworks in the world. But we want to do, if you're someone who's developing any open source projects based on testing tools, test frameworks, if you're looking for help and sponsorship, we are there to help you. We just announced a 250K grant for open source, and you might be, go ahead and apply on the website, or you could reach out to open source at lambdatest.com, and that's my email address. As you see on the bottom left, you have @Manoj9788. That's my Twitter ID, and that's my LinkedIn ID as well as my GitHub ID. So you can reach out to these email addresses for any questions you may have on TAS, on open source, on grants, and also we do all of this if you're using any web development projects or mobile development projects. If you need an infrastructure to run your tests, we also provide free licenses for open source as well, so you could reach out. And thank you so much for patiently listening in. That shows how much all of you are very much interested in testing, which is still an afterthought for many of the enterprises out there. So a round of applause for all of you, and thank you so much for being here.
For example, India, Hotstar kind of thing, you can say. Like, for example, when India-Pakistan match happens, like the user rate will increase tremendously at the same time. But if the match completes, it decreases down. So how do I know, like, the user will go, and then how do I scale up with that way? My question actually is there any platform or something else so that recent developer can understand, like, how to know, like, this number of user will get, so that I can take this in number of instances. So you're getting my point, I think.
Yes, thank you. I missed the part where you said what developer you are?
I'm actually a kind of a full stack developer.
Full stack developer, okay,
Yeah.
Got it. Cool, wonderful question, thanks for asking. So I think just to give a background over the question of the initial part, so your good name?
Yeah, my name is Girdhar Vikas.
Vikas, I'll call it Vikas, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks. So Vikas' question was around how do I determine and,
I mean,
when
like,
things are happening at scale. Yeah.
Is there any platform so that we can understand, like for example, the 1,000 users, so you can take one EC2 instance, or if 2,000 users, then you can take like 1.5 or 1.2 EC2 instance. So is there any platform so that we can take the numbers, like how can we determine, like, this instance is enough for this number of users? So is there any platform for this?
I think the answer is not silver bullet like this. I can't give you names of GitHub repositories, but there are a lot of information around that we can learn from. So the way how Kubernetes replicas work is one of the examples, right? I mean, the moment it sees more requests, it automatically creates clusters for you. That is one of the ways to learn. So probably if you're interested, you can see how they work around the replicas part of it. And even tasks in the talk that I mentioned, in the self-hosted way of inside the Synapse Suite, I mentioned there is little jobs, there's a lot of containers in it. So when the tests increases, say today you run 10 tests and tomorrow you run 100 tests, so automatically the self-hosted environment, even though it is self-hosted environments, you might be constrained with your compute resources. So the task will automatically be able to balance it out for you and increase the number of instances for you. So all that logic is within that. So if you're interested in learning that part, and if you're not doing it right way, we are not doing it right way, you could come and check it out and improve that as well. So I don't have to put it short, I don't have a list of projects or a platform that I would say that exists to learn on how to scale, but I think there are a lot of projects around which already does that, and the code is open and we can learn from it. Example, the replicas part of Kubernetes, and in TAS we have that as well. And to your previous question around how do I know how many sort of users will come in and what sort of infrastructure that I should have. So I think one good part is analytics. So most of the people don't look at it from a testing perspective as analytics. So analytics is a beautiful piece of information that you already get where your users are coming from, whether they are coming in from particular Windows machine or a Mac, or whether they have could come from a particular mobile devices. Because when it comes to mobile, if you're an app development company, who develop apps for users, I think that's where the most confusing part comes into picture. So I think in that case is understanding your analytics, looking at past, how the users are coming from, and making sure those resources are available with the intelligence part, and making sure those clusters are scaled, I think will be the way to go forward.
So there is no any platform so that I can determine like this number of instance will use for this number of users.
No, I don't think so. According to me, I haven't seen it. I mean, I'm happy to learn from you all.
Yeah,
if
for
that is
recent
anything.
developer, kind of like, for example, if anyone starts there in this background, so they will confuse a very lot, like how much instance is enough for that number of users actually.
I mean, it's hypothetical, right? I mean, it depends, I would say, because you can't figure out, or you can't create an infrastructure with having some number in mind. You will only grow exponentially. Even Hotstar, for that matter, they were struggling when they started. So now we call it engineering marvel because they understood the nuances of it, and now it's even scalable from 20 lakh viewers to probably 1 crore viewers. And it happens only based on probably there's a number of API calls that happens. There's some sort of mechanism that they use. I think they have engineering blog published as well. So I think that's something that you could learn from as well.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks. Any other questions?
Ms. Paul Joachim. So I'm here because a friend of mine invited me. It's my first time.
Okay.
George, thanks to him. So I come from a pharmaceutical background. Right. So I came here because George told me that it's a startup. It's a startup platform where we get to network, and people of like mindset can network and grow together. So myself, having graduated with a bachelor's in pharmacy, I am looking forward to investing into the tech aspect of pharmaceutical enterprise, if you understand. So my question is, what would open source, right, as a community at large, the impact it's going to have on the pharmaceutical sector at large? Like, what is the contribution that I, my pharmaceutical enterprise startup, all right, like what would be the contribution for open source to me?
I think,
and myself to open source, of course.
Right. Let me summarize the question to make sure if I got it right. So your question is around, you come from an enterprise background where you're looking at open sourcing something, and you are looking at how do we improve community contribution. Is that your question?
No, improving community contribution in the pharmaceutical sector, because like the tech aspect of the pharmaceutical sector, because it's an upcoming sector, So what would open source enhance the tech aspect of the pharmaceutical enterprise? Because I'm not sure I'm the only person that's into the pharmacy sector here. Am I?
Looks like. So the question is, how many of you have worked or from a pharmaceutical background? Anyone raise hands for my friend
Tech
out there?
aspect, yeah, tech.
Who work for a tech-based company, something like
In the pharmaceutical sector.
pharmaceuticals, Novartis, Sun Pharma, some of those companies? Looks like no one, my friend. Yeah.
Be brainstorming about this off stage.
Yeah.